The captain comes through in the clutch. The Kings get the split in Edmonton and are headed back home. We'll break it all down and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. We'd love for you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we're on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years, the Fox Sports Radio Network, also host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 17 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. Join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free in the App Store or Google Play. Well, the LA Kings played Game 2 of their playoff series against the Oilers in Edmonton, looking to bounce back from their tough Game 1 loss. As for the lineup in this one, for the Kings, a little bit different. We would see Quinton Byfield move back up on the top line with Anze Kopitar and Adrian Kempe. Second line stayed the same with Philip Deneau, Victor Arvidsson, and Trevor Moore. P.L. Dubois was the third line center with Kevin Fiala and Alex Laferriere moving back down to that third line. And then you had the fourth line of Blake Lizotte, Trevor Lewis, and Carl Grundstrom, sort of. We'll explain more about that as we go forward. The defensive pairings were the same. Mikey Anderson, Drew Doughty, Vladislav Gavrikov, Matt Roy, Andreas Englund, Jordan Spence, and in net, we would have Cam Talbot getting the start with David Rittich serving as the backup. As for the game, quick recap, then we'll get much more in depth into what happened during the game. But the Kings got off to the all-important first goal of this one. LA scoring first, Adrian Kempe on a sweet wrist shot off a great steal and pass from Anze Kopitar, and the Kings were up 1-0. Kempe scored again in the first period. He gets his third of the postseason, second of the game. Kopitar again assisting on this one. Juice batting the puck out of the air after a Kopitar pass was deflected by a defender, and the Kings grabbed a 2-0 lead. Great start for LA. Now, Edmonton would cut it to 2-1, but then Drew Doughty scored on a break-in, jumping up in the play, making it 3-1 after one period. So a great first period for the LA Kings. However, the second period would belong to the Oilers, who scored a pair of goals to tie it up at 3-3. Third period, the two teams would then trade goals. Kevin Fiala scoring his first of the playoffs, Jordan Spence and Quinton Byfield assisting, but Edmonton would answer. We were tied at 4-4 after regulation. And then 2 minutes and 7 seconds into sudden death, the captain, Anze Kopitar, scores on a break-in to end the game. His first goal this postseason, Quinton Byfield and Mikey Anderson with the assists. And the Kings skate off with a huge 5-4 win to even the series at 1-1, heading home for games 3 and 4. As far as the game stats in this one, again, Kings get the 5-4 victory. Shots on goal favored Edmonton 31-26. Power play, Oilers were 1 for 3. Kings 0 for 3. Faceoffs barely favored the Oilers 31-30. Block shots in favor of Edmonton 23-20. And the hits, I don't know what's going on with the hits, by the way. They are outrageously high. But anyway, the Oilers were credited with 55 hits and the Kings with 53. So one word to describe the win over the Oilers. I'm going to go with the word diligence. What is the definition of diligence? It is careful and persistent work, constant and earnest effort to accomplish what is undertaken. Well, after losing that opener 7-4 and not looking very good at all, I think we all wondered if the Kings were going to be able to bounce back in game number 2. And if so, how are they going to do it? Well, with diligence, persistent hard work, and effort. The Kings dictated the style of game to the Oilers in this one. They got the lead, which certainly helps, and LA never trailed in this game. The Kings were much stronger in the neutral zone. They didn't allow the Oilers to skate through that 1-3-1. They forced the Oilers to dump the puck in for the most part. And if you're watching the game, every time Edmonton dumps in the puck into the Kings zone, consider that a win. Now, even if the Oilers are able to get on the forecheck and maybe generate a goal, the Kings are still making the Oilers work for what they're having to do. Again, diligence. Great job by head coach Jim Hiller making the adjustments. Great job by the players of implementing the plan on the ice. This series is going to be a battle of wills and who can dictate the flow and pace of the game. Game 1, it was clearly the Oilers. Game 2, it was the Kings. Anze Kopitar, the overtime hero in game number 2, talking about the difference in game 2 for the Kings. He said, quote, "A much better effort structurally from the team. We're still taking a few unnecessary penalties, which we're trying to avoid, and we'll try and fix what's going forward. Playoffs, everything's tight, and usually one goal makes the difference." Well, one goal certainly made the difference in this one. First and foremost, this was a great team win for the Kings, but I do want to single out a couple of players. As for the 3 stars of the game, I think the number 1 and number 2 stars were kind of interchangeable. I think it was clearly these 2 guys. But for the 3rd star, I think it could have been a few different players, which, to be honest, is what the Kings need if they're going to win this series. They're going to need a handful of guys to come up big on a given night. So let's start with one of the guys I considered for the number 3 star, defenseman Mikey Anderson. Played 21 minutes and 12 seconds, was a +1, had an assist on the overtime game winner, and most importantly, saved a goal from being scored in the first period when the Kings are up 2-0 and Edmonton looking to get some momentum, laying on the goal line on a scramble play in front of the net to keep the puck out. That was awesome by Mikey Anderson. Drew Doughty, he played 29 minutes and 7 seconds in this one, had obviously a big goal. Now, I did get a little bit fortunate as he was skating in on Edmonton goalie Stuart Skinner. He did get his stick checked. He couldn't make that final move, but the puck ended up trickling through the Oilers netminder anyway. So a little bit fortunate on that, but still credit Drew for jumping up in the play and taking it strong to the net. That was a great job on his part and something that was great to see. The Kings, if they're going to win the series, are going to need some contributions from their defense, and Drew Doughty certainly did it on that play, and he was a +1 in the game. And Kevin Fiala, maybe not quite as active as I would have liked. He is playing, though, on the 3rd line for the most part, so his minutes are a bit limited, but still came up with a big 3rd period goal. That said, my number 3 star of the game, and checking the 3 stars of the game, I'm going to go with Quinton Byfield as the number 3 star. 2 assists in this one. Also provided an important screen in front of the net on the Oilers netminder on the Kevin Fiala goal, but he had the primary assist on the Kopitar overtime game winner. Now, he did admit afterwards that his deflection wasn't exactly what he was trying to do, but that's still a great example of doing something subtle and positive and something good happening out of it. If you didn't see the overtime game winner, I'm sure you did, but Mikey Anderson is throwing it up along the boards out of the Kings' end. Now, if it goes all the way down the ice, it's an icing and comes back down in the Kings' end, but Quinton Byfield did a great job getting his stick on the puck to prevent that icing. That's a big play. Now, did he intentionally mean to deflect it right on the stick of Anze Kopitar, who was breaking in? No, but again, an example of doing the right thing, making a positive play, a little play that ends up turning into a big play. Interesting that Quinton Byfield was originally slated to play on the 3rd line to start this game, but Jim Hiller apparently had a change of heart, put him on the top line with Kopi and Kempe, and it certainly paid off. My number 2 star is Anze Kopitar, maybe a little bit of a controversial selection, obviously getting the overtime game winner, 3rd overtime game winner in the playoffs in his career. That's the most in Kings history. Also had a great steal and pass on that first goal of the game. Great anticipation to pick off that pass. He could have easily been the number 1 star. I'll give my reasons why I went with somebody else, but still a huge game for the captain. Awesome to see him get that beautiful game-winning overtime goal on a wrist shot into the top corner of the net. But for my number 1 star, I'm going with Adrian Kempe with his 2 goals. And I think, obviously, the overtime game winner is an important goal. It won the game, but I think it was very important. The Kings set the tone in this game early on, and getting the lead and getting that first goal was huge. And Adrian Kempe scoring the 2 goals early on. And again, that set the tone for the game. I thought that was extremely important. And that's why I'm going to go with Adrian Kempe as the number 1 star. I've talked about it, even though he didn't lead the team in goals this season. I still think he has the best shot on the team. I think he's got the best scoring touch on the team, and he certainly showed it on those first 2 goals. The first one, a snipe into the top of the net, and then the second one, he bats it out of midair and into the net. I heard Oilers defenseman Mattias Ekholm call that second goal lucky. Are you kidding me? that was absolutely skill to pick the puck out of the air like that. There's no way that was luck. He absolutely meant to do what he did, and that was great skill. So Matthias Ekholm would take that nonsense somewhere else. But a great game for Adrian Kempe. And early on in the series, he has been the one forward that's really jumped out, obviously, offensively with 3 goals in 2 games. Keep shooting the puck, Juice. You got it going on right now. And for your teammates, keep feeding him. It'd be great to see him get a power play goal at some point going forward as well. So those are my 3 stars of the game in a big, big game 2 performance for the LA Kings. But again, it was a great team effort for the Kings, and that's what they needed to even up that series, heading back to LA even at 1-1. Some wanted goalie Cam Talbot to be replaced for game number 2. And from what I'm hearing, there may even be some people who want him replaced for game number 3. We'll talk about the night that the Kings netminder had here next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. I have to admit, I definitely have a competitive side. I think we all do, but my competitive side enjoys playing Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you can play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that can bring you big money. But the best part is playing with your friends. I can charge them rent on my iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly, but now I can also rob their vaults of riches for myself. And the leaderboards show me who is the biggest Monopoly tycoon. You can team up with your friends and people from all around the world in timed tournaments that earn huge rewards. So get in on the game, join your friends, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store and Google Play. I think the 2 most difficult positions in all the sports, quarterback in football and goalie in hockey. You got to have amazing focus. And obviously, goaltending in the playoffs is magnified, and that's why you had some people talking about making a goalie change for game number 2 after Cam Talbot allowed 6 goals in game number 1. I said I thought that was too much of a panic move, that you didn't want to overreact to just one game. And plus, I think, to be fair to Cam Talbot, a lot of the goals he allowed in game 1 were the result of bad defense. So I think sticking with Cam Talbot was the right move. The Kings decided to do that. And I thought for the most part in game number 2, I actually thought he played pretty well. Now, it was a little bit of a mixed bag. There were a few goals he allowed that I would put in the stoppable category, but he also had some grade A elite saves as well. So let's examine the 4 goals that he allowed. The first goal was scored by Brent Kulak. He's a third pairing defenseman, only had 3 goals in the regular season. He scored on a one-timer from the top of the faceoff circle, no deflection, no screen. Now, it was a heavy shot, but I would put that one in the stoppable category. The second goal was scored by Dylan Holloway. He's a 4th-line winger, scored on a wrist shot on a slight odd man rush. It was from the top of the faceoff circle. Now, Jordan Spence was defending. I don't think that he got a piece of that puck as it came in. Another one that I would put in the stoppable category. The third goal, Zach Hyman scores on the power play, an elite goal scorer, scoring on a one-timer on a pass from low to high that forced Talbot to move from his left to his right. Matt Roy, unfortunately, couldn't get his stick in the passing lane. Nothing Talbot could do on that one. And then the fourth goal, Dylan Holloway again, in transition, a bit of a 3-on-2. He had some time and space, lets the wrist shot go from the top of the faceoff circle. And I initially thought that this one was in that stoppable category, but after looking at a couple of different replays, it did look like it deflected off the stick of Kings defenseman Mikey Anderson and then fluttered into the top part of the net. So I'm going to give Cam Talbot a pass on that one. So overall, I think 2 of the 4 goals he allowed were stoppable. However, Talbot also made many big saves on the night, 4 goals allowed on 31 shots, and there were some elite level saves. The biggest one obviously was absolutely robbing Leon Draisaitl, who's an elite goal scorer, on the power play with the game tied 3-3 in the final seconds of the second period. His best save of the playoffs so far without question. And also situationally, which I think is a word, there was a huge save as well. The situation was, again, 3-3 final seconds of the second period. If that goal goes in, Edmonton gets the lead going into the third, and maybe that's tough to overcome. I think the Kings certainly are much better when the game's tied or they're in the lead. So that was a huge, huge save, not only because of the situation, but just because it was an amazing save. He also stopped center Ryan McLeod on a shorthanded breakaway in the second period. So there were some big saves for Cam Talbot in this one. and a couple of goals that were stoppable. So to me, all in all, I thought it was a B grade for Cam Talbot. And he certainly wasn't a wall, but I think he was definitely good enough to get the job done. I think he rewarded the Kings for the confidence they had in him to start him in game 2. And to me, there's no question that he should be the starter in game number 3. Another focus for the Kings coming out of game 1, obviously, was the penalty kill and taking penalties. Now, the Kings did allow a power play goal in game 2, but they only went to the penalty box 3 times. That's not bad. Quentin Byfield called for a trip in the first period. Blake Lizotte was called for hooking in the second, and Matt Roy a delay a game in the second as well. The Kings did not take a penalty in the third period or overtime. I think all in all, a pretty acceptable night as far as the number of penalties taken and how the penalty kill performed, as lethal as the Oilers power play can be. I think if you ask Jim Hiller if you would be okay with 3 power play chances against and 1 power play goal scored, I think he probably would take that. Edmonton is now 4 for 7 on the power play in the series, and obviously that will continue to be a huge focus going forward. If the Kings can take 3 or less penalties and if they can allow 1 or fewer power play goals, that's obviously a huge plus for the Kings. They were able to do it in game 2, didn't do it in game 1. We mentioned Leon Draisaitl had a couple of assists. He assisted more specifically on that power play goal by Zach Hyman. We have not mentioned Connor McDavid's name, and the reason we have not is because after that monster game in game 1 where he had 5 assists, in game 2, he had 1 assist, a secondary assist on the Hyman power play goal. He was credited with 1 shot on goal, and for him, by his standards, and by anybody's standards, honestly, Connor McDavid had a very quiet night, and credit the Kings for doing a great job playing defense on him as a team, as a 5-man unit, not giving him that time and space, always knowing where he is on the ice. He didn't have a chance to ever build up his speed and slice through the neutral zone and show up that creativity and put the Kings on their heels. So obviously another key for the Kings, containing the Oilers superstars. They certainly did that in game number 2 with Connor McDavid having a very quiet night. I wouldn't anticipate that a lot going forward, but again, containing him, keeping him off the scoreboard as much as possible, and not letting him dictate the style of game is a huge key for the Kings going forward. Obviously, the Kings are going to need more of that going forward, playing on that against that Oilers superstar, the team defense. They did it in game 2, didn't do it in game 1. So the Kings get the split. They steal home ice advantage away from Edmonton and make it a best of 5 series. We're going to look ahead to game 3 and check in on the Ontario Reign and how they did in their playoff opener. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. When you're drafting for your fantasy team, do you ever wish you could handpick the best stats for your business team? If you're building a talent roster, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. Indeed does the hard hiring work for you. You can hire fast with Indeed. Just sponsor a job, and they'll match you with quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed fit your job description right when you post. Join over 3 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Indeed knows that when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. And that's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. The LA Kings face the Edmonton Oilers in Game 3 of the Stanley Cup playoffs in Los Angeles, 7:30 p.m. Pacific time, Friday night. Catch every moment of the hometown broadcast of your LA Kings with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search LA Kings. Well, looking ahead to game number 3 in LA on Friday, there was a bit of an injury scare for the Kings in game number 2. Second line center Philip Deneau took a pretty big hit from Zach Hyman in the third period. He was shaken up on the play, left the ice, stayed on the bench, and did return a short time later to finish out the game. He didn't seem to have his minutes restricted in any way after that hit, and you never know how a player will feel the next day when they wake up. And the Kings traveling back to LA have not heard any reports as far as Philip Deneau suffering any effects of that hit, so looks like he's okay, fortunately. and we'll be good to go in game number 3. Hopefully we won't get an update on anything further going into that game number 3. As for the hit, it was in the head area, but to be fair, Deneau was bent over. So pretty hard to make a hit on somebody who's kind of bent over like that and not have there be any head contact. I don't think there was any intent by Zach Hyman to hurt Phillip Deneau, just a very hard hockey hit, and glad that Phillip is okay. I would not anticipate any changes in the lineup for the Kings in game number 3. Now, Jim Hiller did certainly shorten the bench for game number 2. Carl Grundstrom played 25 seconds in the game. Now, apparently Jim Hiller told him that this was probably going to be the case, that he was kind of there for an emergency situation, and that he was going to go basically with 2 forwards on the 4th line and rotate people through, which we've seen him do in the 11-7 setup. But guys like Quentin Byfield and Kevin Fiala, Alex Laferriere got some extra ice time, and I think that that's worked for those guys, kind of young, energetic guys, getting those extra shifts. And again, Jim Hiller not afraid to mix things up during a game. So I think the Kings are definitely used to that. Seemed to work fine for them in game number 2. So I would expect the lineup to be exactly the same and the strategy to be exactly the same for game number 3 as we had in game number 2. And as great as game 2 was, I still think the Kings have not played their A game yet, which I think is encouraging. I think that after you watch that first game and how bad it went, I think you might have walked away from it saying, oh my God, the Kings are going to have to play a perfect game to beat this team. They didn't play a perfect game in game number 2. It was a solid B grade, I would say, for the Kings. They certainly did a lot of good things, but it wasn't perfect. They could do better. I think certainly the power play has to be better. Now, they've got away with it so far in the first 2 games, getting the split. But I've said all along, and this is not a bold prediction necessarily, but the Kings have to get something out of their power play if they're going to win this series. They're 0 for 5 so far with a man advantage. And I will credit the Oilers. They have a very aggressive penalty kill, and it's giving the Kings some problems in getting things set up. But like I said, look, the Oilers have the advantage on special teams as far as their power play, which is amazing. But the Kings need to be able to counter a little bit with something from the power play. I'm not saying it's got to lead the way, but it has to be a contributing factor in the mix for the Kings that they're going to win the series. They're going to have to get 3 or 4 power play goals, I think, to win the series. So far, nothing after the first 2 games. So that's the situation going into game number 3. I'm going to let you know about what this show is going to do coming up on Friday, because I didn't really think about it, but I do have something to tell you. But before I get into that, I do want to mention the Ontario Reign opened up the Calder Cup playoffs in the AHL. They had a very nice 5-1 win over the Edmonton Oilers AHL affiliate, the Bakersfield Condors, last night. Tyler Madden had 2 goals, one of them on the power play. Akil Thomas scored a power play goal as well. And Joe Hickett's a shorthanded goal for the Reign, all in support of goaltender Eric Portillo, who made 30 saves in net and getting the victory. Now, the first round of the AHL playoffs is the best of 3. So the Reign can close it out with a win in Bakersfield on Saturday. If there is a deciding game 3, that would be in Ontario on Sunday. But a good start to the AHL playoffs for the Kings AHL affiliate, the Ontario Reign. All right, I talked about game number 3, and I also want to talk about game number 4, because I have mentioned that I would like to have a Locked On LA Kings meetup before Sunday's game 4, and that is going to happen. Now, I'm not sure yet if it'll be at the Yard House or at Lucky Strike, the bowling alley right there at LA Live, but I'll let you know on Friday's show. And speaking of Friday's show, again, I had the light bulb go off today. It makes no sense for me to do a preview show on Friday and then on Monday have to recap games 3 and 4. Those games are way too important. They need their own dedicated shows. So game number 3 obviously is 7:30 Friday in LA. I will be doing our Friday show after game number 3. So we will be recapping game 3 after the game on Friday. So that's going to be, obviously, look, the game will get over after 10 o'clock probably. I drive home, put the show together, and record it. So we're talking probably around midnight. So it's technically, I guess you could say, probably going to be a Saturday show. But again, it just makes no sense. I'm not going to recap 2 huge playoff games in one 30-minute show on Monday. So again, for you everydayers, right? If you're going to listen to the show on Friday, usually we do it early in the day. And if there's a game Friday, which is rare, we would preview the game and then recap it on. We're not doing that. So again, Friday's show will be late night. Probably if you're going to watch it, it would be sometime on Saturday, to be honest, unless you're a night owl. So again, Friday's show will be recorded after Game 3. We'll recap Game 3. It will still be a fan feedback show. We will still include some of your feedback in that show. But obviously, gonna do again the show, Friday show after game number 3. So a late night, early Saturday morning show for our Friday episode of Locked On LA Kings. And also on that Friday show, I will let you know exactly where the meetup is going to be. On Sunday, I'm going to go check out Lucky Strike before Game 3 on Friday, see what it looks like, and then I'll make a decision, and we'll let you know on Friday's show. If you want to join us for the meetup on Sunday, exactly where that is going to be. So one more time for you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day. Friday, we're going to recap Game 3 late night episode. Probably check it out on Saturday, and then we will include some of your feedback as well on that show on Friday. If you want to get an email in, talk about the Kings, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com. We always welcome your comments if you're watching on YouTube as well. Helps the algorithm. Really appreciate it. Likes and comments are great. Also would love you to stay interactive with the show on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. Great to be able to talk about a Kings win after game number 2, an exciting finish. Anze Kopitar with the game winner, and looking forward to how this rest of the series is going to go. It's been a very interesting first 2 games so far. Kings are right in there with the Oilers, tied at 1 after 2 games. Thanks for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. This is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We will talk to you on Friday. And as always, go Kings go.